So this book that Josh wrote is Brexit, and it has to do with this civil war of the establishment and really how dark money and the powers that be. And I really see so many parallels. This is definitely happening worldwide. We're seeing this very capitalistic. It's almost like their death throes and last grasps is the sort of the proletariat is starting to gain power, and they're really just sticking it to us.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how it relates to
that's
here.
Also, and that's also a big reason why we have the big
yes.
censorship.
So here is Josh.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
I think your audio...
No, I think it's us. Say something.
Try it again.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine. It's
okay.
Our speakers are down. Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
All right, so thank you at 1:30 in the morning for toughing it out with us. It's very much appreciated. But, people in San Francisco like to wake up at, the middle of the night in order to stay on New York time. So, we're very grateful for that, Josh. So please introduce yourself to our audience.
That's all right. I'm a night owl, and I'm always like pumped to talk about social media destroying the world. So the time doesn't really matter. But yeah, hi, I'm Josh Hamilton, and yeah, I'm here to talk about my book, Brexit, the Establishment Civil War, which I basically see as a case study in how social media is destroying our democracy and can be exploited by very powerful people with plenty of money to throw at it to divide us and exploit that. And also, we are out of the EU, not the euro. We were never in the euro.
See?
Okay.
That's the thing. I knew that was
my
wrong.
apologies. For some reason I thought that was a contentious
it was, but
it was. There was a huge fight about the euro, about whether the UK was going to ditch the pound, but we stuck with it. But more contentious is your flag behind you. Being from Northern Ireland, like you.
Is that
you had
horrible?
You had like
you gotta get
no.
Oh my God! Is it wrong? Is it wrong?
No. It's just because like 50% of Northern Ireland considers that to be our flag, and 50% of us consider the Irish flag to be our flag. So you took like a stab at it. For me, that's my flag, because that's like the United Kingdom flag.
Oh my God! Now that I know that, I will never do that again, because I could get it wrong. I only did that because it sort of matched there was something where I looked you up or something that was UK, and I guess I saw it with that, and then okay, I'm never doing that again. But thank you for correcting me.
No, it's all right. Like, it's not even a crazy. It's just funny that you picked that. Like, if it was on our flyer for tonight, because when I put Brexit, and that was the other thing, is on our flyer it was with the word Brexit, so I think it just made sense for people, and so because it was on our flyer, I put it there. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not offended in any way. Even if it wasn't, like, I didn't consider it to be my flag, I wouldn't be offended, because it is and the thing about the Irish flag is some people don't see it as the flag for Northern Ireland, even though it's meant to be for the whole of Ireland. Like, it was literally designed for like the Protestants or like Unionists, who are the orange, and then the green is like the nationalists and like the Catholic part of Ireland, and white is for peace. So it's meant to be a whole flag for the whole of the island.
Well, I was honestly just thinking about the concept of Brexit, and to me, people think Brexit is BR for Britain, exit. So I think like that was sort of my
No,
it wasn't so much to you personally. I do know that you live in Northern Ireland. I think that's awesome, and I can definitely tell the difference between your accent and that of somebody that is from like London.
Yes, it's definitely. Well, of course,
the best one is that
Jen's going to kill me Jen's going to kill me if I even try to talk with an Irish accent.
Don't do it.
Well, I found out recently that
it's not good.
That my grandmother is actually from Ireland.
And still, you should never talk like.
Well, look, again, I'm eventually I'll find out the origins and the truth, and immerse myself in the culture and learn how to talk it.
So will you explain, because obviously, people know what the idea is of Brexit, separating from the EU. But can you explain like the sides of the argument, like in terms of who is fighting for what? Like, I mean, we know that obviously that is definitely the right-wing position. And can you explain why, like what the background is of who's fighting for Brexit?
So I kind of divide it into like 4 categories. essentially I see like the two sides of the argument that was had between like the people, and the two sides of the argument that was had between the establishment. It's the establishment arguments are the ones that are going to win out, hence the title of the book, The Establishment Civil War. But basically, it was the argument for the establishment was that Europe was holding Britain back because we were, getting wound up in all of this red tape because the EU issues a lot of declarations on different like rules and laws that we're meant to have, and over the past 40 years their kind of scope has expanded and expanded and expanded into loads of different areas that were never envisioned initially. And the argument was that Britain could be, more prosperous and free outside of those regulations. It was a very like neoliberal deregulatory argument. And then there was also
nationalistic, very nationalistic.
Yeah, they really played on the sort of, Britain can be great again. Like it was such a mirror of the Make America Great Again thing. And
they were call that neoliberal, which is so interesting. And people need to understand that in this country. Like to you, that's neoliberal. To us, that's conservative. That's how far right we are. So people need to be aware of that. Like that would not be something that you would think a neoliberal would say here. Conservative.
I mean, like for me, neoliberalism isn't exactly like a left or right ideology. It's one that's been subsumed by like basically the entire like ruling class of both Britain and America, in my view, anyway. And it's basically defined by like three things. It's deregulation, it's cutbacks of public services, and it's privatization of industry and sell-off of public assets. And that's what happens every single time we see someone arguing for like free trade or, cutting the red tape to like free up the economy. And it happened over the past 40 or 50 years throughout the world. Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine is a fantastic exploration of it. And she really lays out exactly how it's always like every single like encroachment of neoliberalism is preceded by a crisis, like a shock, hence the shock doctrine. And I basically think that Brexit is going to be the shock that will give us this next wave of neoliberalism. And I feel that around the world, COVID is also going to be exploited for the very same reason. And it concerns me a little bit, and it's definitely something we got to watch out for, because it's going to be used to give power and money to people who probably have way too much of it already.
So you heard what I was saying before you came on. You were listening for a while. Like I got a lot of crap today from people, and all I'm doing is just postulating, just saying like, let's talk about this. Let's reason this. Let's, and it's like vitriolic. You don't care about other people. You're not going to, it's not about you. It's about and I'm like, yeah. And that's what people were saying. And we were talking about 9/11 when we gave up our 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights in our Patriot Act. And people were so willing to do that. And nobody was going to think that through. And we never got those back, by the way. So, once you give up your rights, you don't get them back, so it's just, but yet, yes, I'm still like just dealing with this just from, thinking about the vaccine issue.
And I mean, like, this is one of the things that like I raise in my book, and is still really prescient now. Like, fortunately for me, because it means I get to talk about it, but unfortunately for society that we haven't dealt with it, is that like social media seems to just amplify any division that exists. It seems to, whether maliciously or not, it just seems to like pour petrol on like hot button issues and cause these huge fires, and it seems to make people crazy. And I was actually listening to a podcast the other day between Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein, who have been controversial for their own reasons, but like Jordan Peterson put it brilliantly, and I think it actually explains a lot of madness that's going on. He was talking about how much we've been like immersed in our digital communities this year.
Yes.
And how much it's ruined us. So like the quote is, he says, "A phenomenon that has recently emerged from the increase in online community interactions is a seeming abundance of acute paranoia. One the causes may lie in the ability to hyper-select the communities themselves. And at your weakest point psychologically, you choose the least demanding compatriots and see your craziest ideas are going to be less likely to be challenged. And I think that like speaks so beautifully to where we've ended up. Like, people do not want to listen to each other, and they will literally just sit around and discuss things with the people that are going to agree with them. And it's like echo chambers and filter bubbles on steroids, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, because anyone with a dissenting voice seems to just be getting like wiped out of the conversation. People like even like Stephen Crowder. I know he's not exactly on the same side of the political conversation as you guys, but
not a fan at all.
But he is always well sourced, and you can disagree with it, what he takes from it, but he provides sources for everything he talks about. And he's been like temporarily suspended from YouTube. And that's
I have been very clear from the beginning that I support. I am a First Amendment absolutist when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I was against Alex Jones being deplatformed, and he's a buffoon. So I don't really care. Yeah, no. I'm not for Trump being deplatformed, quite honestly. So, I take that very seriously. It is look, when people act out of fear, it freaks me out.
And again,
I get scared when people are acting out of fear because we're losing reason.
And Bernie came out in defense of Trump the other day, and people literally lost their minds.
They can't handle it. They can't handle it.
I think he's a terrible person. And I really don't want him to be, saying the things that he says, but I really don't think censorship is the answer.
Censorship is never the answer. Well, explain how, which wouldn't necessarily be a horrible thing with social media if there wasn't this corporate sinister overlords that oversee it. So if it were really like, let's say, just free broadband, social and there was nobody like in charge of it, then it wouldn't be as problematic. I think it would have other issues, but we're seeing such a dominance, and that's what your book is about. I'd love for you to talk about how that. Okay, by the way, it's not really Jimmy Dore. Okay,
yeah, I was wondering. I was like, amazing Jimmy Dore, and then
it's not Jimmy Dore. It's somebody. We think it's one of our trolls, Declan.
Josh, if you can,
I was in the middle of asking a question.
I apologize.
Explain how that ownership of the media is what connected it to Brexit and how that worked.
Well, the way that, with the problem with the media is that, and the problem with social media as well is that, as I mentioned before, they just tend to enjoy causing chaos. And I think the reason that social media has caused so much chaos in both Britain and America is because they were the most divided already. Whether you can blame the media over the last 40 years for that, I definitely think they've got a part to play. But the way it was exploited is just phenomenally terrifying. So you guys are probably familiar with the company Cambridge Analytica, and I'm not going to go.
Of course we are.
And I'm not going to go to town on them specifically because they're just one company trying to exploit this. This is not something that it's like exclusive to them, but the tactics they used are phenomenally destructive for any kind of like reasonable democracy to have in there, where they can just like dump dark ads on social media about anything they want with zero oversight, zero regulation. And this is not me calling for like government control of what people are allowed to say. We have laws for every other type of advertising ever. Like we have the Watershed. I know in America you have like TV political ads. In Britain, we don't even have them because we decided that like politics belongs on the doorstep. It's meant to be about how many people you can talk to and say, hey, come on, let's go knock on doors, or how many people you can get to appear at your rallies, and how many people you can convince your ideas are good. You shouldn't be able to like campaign from behind ironically a laptop or sitting here, but you shouldn't be able to like campaign sitting with a big pile of cash to spend on ads. You should be basing that on the ideas that you can sell to people and convince them to go out and campaign for you. And it's so terrifying that we just sort of allow this. And I think the reason that we've done nothing about it is because, as is very often the case, the media stand to benefit from it because, the more culture war, the more like outrage, the more clicks they get. And the politicians stand to benefit from it because why on earth would they want to regulate something that they can exploit? It's just like the same old tired story where it's something that's going to harm the general public, but will, you know, continue to allow the people who are currently in power to stay there and be unchallenged. And the sort of slow creep of censorship is terrifying to me, because it, like, I got really worried about echo chambers while I was writing my book, about people only hearing their side of the argument, and the only time then they would hear the other side would be someone like parodying what they think about something. And now with people being like banned, it's going to turn places like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube into one giant echo chamber. And if you thought things were bad when we were all on the same platform, like, where do you see how crazy they get when we don't even have access to what the other side are saying of any issue? It's going to get real wild.
Yeah, it's very scary to me. I think that just the whole corporate ownership of it and able to control what we can and can't hear. We've always had significantly worse issues in this country. Recently, it was brought to my attention that there were a bunch of people in the UK, I guess, that had watched Oprah's interview with Meghan and Harry, and they were taken back by how many pharmaceutical ads that were run during that interview. And we're so brainwashed in this country by propaganda and corporatism and stuff like that, that people have literally been herded into their little groups. And what's even more scary than that is that, as somebody who is in the political world, whenever I have done anything to reach out to different people, other-minded people, the other political party, any other demographic, I get nothing but crap from the people that are the Democrat, that are the left, or they're supposed to be our left, which is your right, but our left. But they can't handle it. You're not even allowed to give a platform. I got crap for going on Tim Pool's show. I got crap for having Vosh come on my show. I get crap. Like, you're not allowed to mingle with people that have ever said anything that has been remotely objectionable to anybody. And that's, we're having no discourse at all. And it's very scary. I mean, I agree. This is something that is very concerning to me. As
somebody who lives in the UK, what can you share with people stateside that, you know, the Tories and others were doing to basically, you know, smear Jeremy Corbyn in whatever capacity they needed to ensure that there wasn't a true progressive uprising that could have frankly spilled over, I think, all throughout the UK and throughout Europe and beyond. I am curious from your perspective. You know, obviously they did quite a job of painting him as an anti-Semite, among other things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still baffled at how they managed to like paint the probably like the most prominent anti-racism campaigner in the last 40 years in the UK as anti-Semitic. I'm still baffled at that, if I'm honest. But
that's like Cornel West here.
Yeah,
because they speak out against the state of Israel. That's all it is. And then once you do that, that's it. That's it. So I mean, anyway,
the thing with Corbyn was more based in the way they dealt with like accusations of anti-Semitism within the party, and then they really made a hash of it. But like, I never saw it as Jeremy Corbyn being anti-Semitic, and they just hammered it in the media like endlessly. Yeah. But he was just vilified from every angle. Like, we have a very right-wing print media in Britain, and they still largely control the narrative. And I know that a lot of people are kind of talking about the death of mainstream media and how it's like losing influence and losing clout, but they still drive the news cycle, essentially. If someone goes on CNN in America and says something stupid, or if someone goes on the BBC in Britain and they say something outrageous, that's it. That's all we're talking about. And that they still like have that control of it. But Jeremy Corbyn was a really interesting issue. He got hammered for the idea that we could like spend some money on infrastructure, like you guys were talking about before I came on there, that we could print some money to benefit the country and invest in like hospitals, invest in like infrastructure upgrades, electrifying public transport, just things that would improve the country a little bit, and pump some money into like local builders and construction work and things that would benefit the country. And then they said no, you're a communist, you're going to crash the economy. And then I wrote a piece about in April, and I was like, right, okay, so modern monetary theory, you are going to get your go now. You get to see like how if this theory is rubbish or not, if this was just like all academic speculation, or if it was real. And we've kind of shown that even when it's not under the ideal conditions, because ideally in modern monetary theory, you'd want to print that money and immediately pump it into the economy, into like investing in infrastructure and like projects that are going to grow the economy. Instead, we've just been printing money and giving it to people to keep the country going while we deal with the pandemic. And yet all hell hasn't broken loose yet. There's probably going to be some inflation. Perhaps we can deal with that. I don't know. But, it hasn't been this mad, crazy, like just collapse of Western civilization that people printed it as. In the same way they painted like Bernie's proposals for like Medicare for all,
exactly.
or any kind of investment in, the country, and not like Halliburton. And it's stunning to watch it happen, but I almost think we're reaching this point where if they go too hard, they don't quite. It doesn't ring true, and people sort of start to turn against it. And I think we're slowly getting to that point where people are waking up to the fact where when the entire media says something in unison, people go, "Hang on, why are you all agreeing on this all of a sudden?"
I do think that messaging is very important, but the one thing we've been talking about lately is, big tech censorship is able to succeed because, unfortunately, the thing that independent content creators still haven't learned or understood is that as much as Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, they all have their way of doing business. But the second a pro-worker message starts, working class message starts to take shape, they all unify and crush it with everything they have. The thing that the independent media circuit doesn't understand is that while we do have our differences, we better figure out a way to break bread and check our egos at the door, because if we don't, this is going to turn into a nightmare that people can't even see yet. It's only getting worse. But if you want to combat corporate messaging, people have to unify across the globe. And it's certainly possible. I think Jen's done a great job. Obviously, the Assange telethon pissed off quite a few people. But
I got new haters. I'm so pleased.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
I know.
Do they come with that new hater smell?
Well, of course. Well, we got tens of thousands of people that watched. We had a call to action about, basically bombarding the new Attorney General's office. In fact, it was actually working because one of the Senate switchboard operators got really pissed off and was like, "I can't take this anymore. Stop calling my office." It's like, well, you know what? I hate to say it, but that's how you get stuff done. It's just kind of how it is.
Yeah, we did. I think what you and I had talked about, I was either planning to I talked to you right before we did our Assange telethon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you see any of it? It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it. I mean, like Julian Assange is just like the most perfect example, because he had they've invented these charges, and the British government has arguably circumvented like international law by going into the Ecuadorian embassy and just dragging him out, which is horrifying. But like aside from the kind of invented and then dropped charges, he's done nothing except print the truth, and people can't handle it. It's like the most cliched, it's like, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. It's like,
I was just
actually can't handle the truth.
It was actually a really great Hillary meme back in 2016 of, "You want the truth? I deleted the truth."
Yeah.
And it's like,
but Assange, like, people don't understand. And what's amazing is how the media message over the past 10 years has been so manipulated and contorted. And seriously, if you say things enough, it becomes the truth. When you ask the general person their thoughts about Assange, they'll still think of him as like a rape, but he was charged with rape. They go back to that ridiculous, that bogus Swedish charge, which we know was bogus, was shown to be bogus. But that, of course, didn't get the coverage that the original charge got. So it's like, Julian Assange is a perfect example of how they're closing in and coming together to just basically kill somebody for telling the truth.
You know, the problem is that in the United States, I don't know what it's like in the UK or throughout the rest of Europe. And like I said, conversations like this, I think, are absolutely important. You know, Jen does have a number of friends in the UK. Actually, George Galloway follows her. I'd really like to get him on at some point. I think from the American perspective, you know, our news cycle on, I wouldn't say digital, but at least on TV, it definitely has a very heavy neoliberal slant on audio, radio, and podcasts in general. Much more of a neoconservative slant. Although I will say, there is a very substantially large libertarian movement in the United States. They are extremely civil liberty driven. They are extremely anti-war driven. And a lot of them are and a lot of them are starting to come around on universal health care. And I do think that that's a very important topic because there are a lot of civil libertarians in the UK, but I'm willing to bet that probably not a single one of them would be willing to give up their universal health care. Can you please talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, this is like one of the things I talk about in my book. So I mentioned that I think that the sort of shock of COVID and Brexit combined will usher in this new wave of this next wave of neoliberalism. And honestly, our universal healthcare is something that is going to be up for grabs. Like there's a lot of us in the UK that are very concerned about this. There's been a number of like attempts to sort of put it into law that post Brexit we wouldn't try and like privatize the NHS, which is our national health service. But it's to actually for them to get away with it will be very difficult. But they're doing a damn good job. They're just sort of like slicing off a little tiny bit at a time and doing it by stealth. And all of a sudden one day we're going to turn around and be like, oh, where'd our NHS go? But generally the British public we think that like our universal healthcare is fantastic. And I have to agree. And for me, I don't I can see how I might be able to convince a libertarian that it's a good thing because it provides freedom. If you don't have to worry about like your healthcare costs for anything, you can just, go start a business. You can, you try anything you want. You can change jobs. You can, take some time off and work out what you're going to do next. You can do whatever you want and not have to worry about it. It's like the most freeing thing in the world. And it's, I expressed this to a couple of people that I know in Albany while I was staying with them once, and they looked horrified. They were like, what do you mean? Isn't that communism? And I was like, no.
Well, and that right there, Josh, is also a testament to our education system.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole other problem. But yeah, I mean, we have a very skewed vision, but we're very spoon-fed particular information. I mean, that's a big part of it. And it starts when we start school and it doesn't ever stop. And now it just feeds itself. But so I just saw somebody post something about, will you put that back up?
Yes.
Because that was interesting. And I want to just see what
from Anna Grace, who I do believe is in the UK.
Here. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I am not like a huge EU fan. If someone thinks I'm like if someone thinks I'm like super pro EU and they're listening, that's not the case.
So how do you fall on Brexit?
Well,
how does that
work? And if I could piggyback on that, I think this is a great opportunity for the naivety in the United States for people to understand what actually happened in Greece, because a lot of people really don't know or understand what happened there.
I mean, Greece got really, really screwed over by the EU in terms of like they just came in and they were like, okay, so we're going to give you some money, but then we're going to be in charge of your country, which is a trend that is way more prevalent than people would maybe realize. It's a trend that Naomi Klein actually writes about in The Shock Doctrine fantastically, and she just expresses like the way that the World Bank or the European Central Bank will just go into countries and say, okay, so we're gonna, you know, help you get started. Say there was like a lot of investment offered to post-Soviet states, and they went, okay, so we're gonna help you, but you're gonna, you know, you're gonna implement these like extreme, like free market, laissez-faire policies, or you're not gonna get the money. And they kind of just bullied Greece into like implementing horrendous levels of austerity. But the EU, as I was saying, is a body that it's a lot of good, but it's got a lot of really bad things about it as well. And it's huge. And the disparity between the countries that are in it is the thing that I've come to see as the biggest issue, because you can't take, in my mind at least anyway, countries like Holland or Germany with like really affluent, like well-developed nations and make laws for them that are like encompass the almost the entire economy, the entire legal system, and you can't put them in the same framework as somewhere like Bulgaria or Croatia or any of these countries that joined the EU in the last sort of 15 or 20 years, that just they weren't in the same place economically as the rest of the EU. And it's really difficult to legislate across such a huge and disparate area. Like the United States is huge, but like there's a lot more of like a homogenous culture. Like this is 27 countries they're trying to legislate for, and it's really difficult. And the EU is kind of, I've become like really irritated with the EU in the last year, just with the whole COVID thing, because the reason that we ended up having a referendum, basically, I think, or the reason that David Cameron, our prime minister at the time, wasn't able to offer more to the Eurosceptics in his party was because they said that the levels of immigration to Britain were too high and they wanted to have some control of the border. You can debate as to what you consider too high to be, but there was something like 500,000 to 600,000 people arriving in Britain every year, I think, on average in those couple of years leading up to the vote, which some people might say is too high. Some people would be like, that's great. We need these immigrants to help grow the economy, to take jobs that people aren't willing to take. Like there's you know, plus and minuses to both of it. But David Cameron went and said, look, can we have like a pause on this, and can we just say, look, we know it's against your like fundamental like principles of the EU, but can we have some control of our border temporarily? And they said, no, that's completely contrary to freedom of movement. And then COVID hits, and all of a sudden the EU's like, oh, well, you know, you could always just close your borders whenever you wanted. You know, it was totally your decision as a sovereign nation. And I was like, you hypocrites. Like, you told us it wasn't possible under any circumstances because it was contrary to your fundamental freedoms. And we voted to leave the EU because you said it wasn't possible, partially. And all of a sudden we discover it is. It's driven me a bit insane. So the EU is a really complex body, and it is run by a lot of people who aren't elected. It's so far from the people who are voting on the European elections. The European election turnout is dismal, and people don't feel connected to it. And the reason that I think that we ended up voting to leave was this idea that we should be totally in charge of what happens in Britain. And I don't think that's an insane idea. I mean, I love a lot of the protections that the EU have put in place for workers, consumers, for the environment. But ultimately, it came down to, like, we wanted to have the final say in how we run our country. And to me, that didn't seem like an insane prospect. I am not sure how I would vote if I went back 5 years with this knowledge, because I voted to remain the first time. And I would maybe do it again because I'm terrified of the sort of fallout from it and the people who are currently in charge. You know, so yeah, it's a tricky one.
So that sounds almost like how I felt when I voted for Joe Biden. Like, it wasn't like it's not necessarily the best choice. It was just a choice. But let me just, this will put it in perspective for me. So as somebody who's here, like a Bernie Sanders progressive, right? If I lived in the UK when that vote happened, would I have voted for or against?
That is like the $1 million question, really. Like Jeremy Corbyn is quite similar to Bernie Sanders on a lot of policy. And I was big fans of both of them. Actually, more so of Bernie. I feel like he's got more of a spine.
And that's not good at all for Jeremy Corbyn.
No, I mean, I don't even, maybe a spine's not the way to put it, but he's just like more forceful. I feel like he talks with more passion. Corbyn's not exactly like a natural leader, I feel, in the way that Bernie is. Like Bernie gets up there and just like, says what he thinks most of the time.
So Jeremy Corbyn was not in favor of Brexit.
So he was even meeker.
No, you see, he was traditionally skeptical of the EU because it was kind of controlling of the ability to do state aid. In other words, to like subsidize like industries in Britain. So the EU doesn't like that at all. And there was a lot of left-wingers in the Labour Party, sort of traditional left-wingers, who were not fans of the European Union. And the Labour Party kind of had this weird split where all of the young people in the party were very pro-Europe, and then there was like a Eurosceptic side that was very sort of trying to, that I think ended up maybe voting for Brexit because they felt helpless, and they felt like it was for me it was almost like a cry for help, like a screw you to the establishment, because like a year before the Brexit vote we had an election. And there was 3 million people that voted in the Brexit vote that did not vote in that election. So that means 3 million people said that they felt that this was an important issue, but the previous election was just not on their radar. So the Jeremy Corbyn campaigned for Remain, but he was accused of doing it half-heartedly. And he basically had to hold the party together for 4 years until he was ousted as leader. Between the young students who had like come to the Labour Party in support of him, but then were aware that he didn't really like Europe, and he was sort of siding with the more traditional part of the party, like the real working class, like trade union side, who were not fans of the EU. And it really like split the party, and it really caused a lot of issues. And this is probably ultimately why he never came to power. Was because there was just it was that extra issue that people weren't sure about him, whereas if the elections that he was involved in could have been based on spending on infrastructure, making sure our health service is well funded, making sure that we're moving forward to transition to like a less carbon soaked economy, and clamping down on tax havens and making sure the wealthy don't, hide all their money offshore, and, trying to challenge the establishment. If that had been the sole focus of the campaign, I feel he would have won. And in 2017, when he came this close, the election was less about Brexit. When he then got trounced by Boris Johnson in 2019, it was far more about Brexit. Like Boris Johnson's whole thing, his slogan was "Get Brexit Done," which is, a fantastic pice of, articulate political messaging, but it really worked. And that's where he lost it, I think, was Europe actually caused him to not come to power in my mind, at least anyway.
Okay. So I've concluded that if I were living in the UK, I would be with Labour and I would support Brexit, but I would be very anti-nationalistic and anti-xenophobic and want to not have those things. That's where I would be. Okay, so I'm good. I understand now. I understand. No, that's what I didn't understand. Where would I be?
Before we get to the China question, I want to ask you about.
Well, let's ask him this, though.
Yes. Well, all right. You know what? Let's ask Dustin's question first, which is,
you could probably see that, right, Josh?
Do you have credit unions, and how does your local fiat currencies fare?
Fiat currency. So we have the pound. So that's our currency is like the dollar. So we have total control of that. We have the Bank of England. So I completely forgot the name of the bank. It is 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. And so we have total control of it. So it's that was one of the huge things that happened in Britain. We had that debate over the euro like 15 years ago, where we decided whether we would want to be in the euro and part of the European like monetary project, or whether we wanted to be out of it. And I am so glad that even if it's for totally nationalistic reasons, we decided to keep it, because it means that we don't have this issue where we're having to go back from the euro into our own currency. Is really, really useful. And yet I can't. We do have credit unions, but I'm not like particularly well educated on credit unions.
Right?
So
yeah, guys. Josh isn't. He's not an economist or,
but
a banker. I mean, it's kind of. I was going to say, why not just ask him about like astrophysics? I'm sorry.
No, but I do think it's very important that we have this conversation, because I think, obviously we're big supporters of, outside the box type thinking when it comes to economics. And I do think that modern monetary theory and even UBI have a really important place in where we go forward in terms of economics, not just nationally, but globally. And I think that modern monetary theory is something that probably either gets talked about enough or not nearly enough in a country like the UK, because you have your own currency. So you have the ability to fund your programs as needed. What I do find very interesting is that you do have a plethora of programs that are funded, and you're not exactly a country that's suffering right now. You have universal health care, universal education. You pay close to a living wage. You have job opportunities. You're easily accessible because you have it's a high-speed rail. I mean, whatever you technically call it. I know
they have public
that's going way over budget.
It's the tube, but they have public transport. But see, most places in Europe have better public transportation, but also most places in Europe are much smaller.
That's true.
So it's both. I mean, look, we definitely have horrible public transportation, but we would never be able to have the kind of system that a country the size of the UK would have, that we would have. Like, it's not feasible.
We look back at when universal healthcare took shape, and obviously it's probably Churchill's greatest legacy. But of course, FDR ended up dying. Winston.
It was after Churchill. I thought
it was 1945 or something.
Yeah. So Churchill basically got ousted immediately after the war. Like literally.
He doesn't watch The Crown.
Oh, I don't.
Well, that's your problem. All right. I've been watching The Crown since season 1. Since Churchill was there, so I know all of it.
Yeah, it was Nye Bevan who's the father of the anarchists. But it's interesting. You think we're not suffering. Like the one of the things that really strikes me is another reason that there's so much volatility in both Britain and America is the level of wealth and income inequality.
Oh, yes.
There is. I'm not going to sit here and argue for like equality of outcome, because that's the
no.
Okay, well then, Josh, that's a great segue, because I'm going to piss Jen off now. Too bad. Is there really any point to the royal family?
Oh my God!
To resist? Because it seems to me that you're just giving money away that doesn't really need to be there.
Those are the world's biggest landlords.
Yeah, I mean, the royal family is a complicated one. Like, I have really mixed feelings on it, because
me too.
I hate the rest of the royal family, but for some reason I like the Queen. I don't know why.
You all do.
I can't explain it, but I mean, like the royal family brings in like a stupid amount of money. In just in tourism, and like the amount that we pay them compared to the amount of money that they bring in tourism is it's like 20-fold. I think I can't remember.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
So basically, what you're saying is that Westminster Abbey and places like that are no different than people coming to Disney World. It's kind of
Buckingham Palace.
Sure.
All right. So my thing is like, I don't pretend, if I know that in principle am opposed to the idea of elitism, blue bloods, monarchy, all of that. Like the fact that certain people are just inherently worthier than others is just something that disgusts me to no end. So in theory, I'm opposed to it and I don't like it at all. However, I was a huge Princess Diana fan. Huge. And so to me, anything having to do with like William and Harry and all of that is all like, those are Di's babies. Like I grew, like I can't even. So that to me is something that's just because I like them.
I think Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have done the most tone deaf things that I can possibly imagine. Like we're literally in a situation where like poverty is skyrocketing. Like in Britain, like food bank use is skyrocketing. Yeah. There's 14 or 15 million people living in poverty in Britain. And Meghan Markle goes on Oprah in the midst of all this and complains that no one taught her about the royal family. She was like, as far as I'm concerned, she can like just go live in your mansion in like the California hills and get out, like just stop making it about you. Like we have so many more monstrous problems to deal with than listening to her whine about not being accepted by the royal family. It's like, oh my goodness, someone wasn't accepted by their in-laws. That has never happened in the history of marriage ever. Like
no, like, I definitely don't see her as a victim by any stretch, and that the timing of everything is definitely not right. But the fact that there's people are saying, you mean that they're racist, is a little bit like, where have you been? like of course they're racist.
I think that's a great segue where from a European perspective, I mean, we know how bad corporate media is in the United States. You guys have your own,
it's tabloid. Interesting that theirs is conservative. Like you say your media is conservative, but I think your conservative is our liberal. So most importantly, what's your conservative?
I mean, like the kind of like right wing, like free market, laissez-faire sort of like heritage foundation style of politics,
like a Reagan Republican, right?
Yeah,
no, that sounds like a Democrat to me. What he's describing.
No, I'm saying that their version is something that would be like a throwback to the.
So
1980s.
they don't have conservatives like we have conservatives.
No, we have people. Yeah, well, the problem, of course, is everything that transpired. I always say a lot of it started in Reagan's. I mean, things started obviously when Reagan became president. Labor was crushed. Not just in the United States, but probably globally as well, when he fired the air traffic controllers in 1981, and there was not a single union that stood up to him. And
that's when we lost labor.
Yeah, piecemeal as it went forward, obviously the massive tax cuts, of course, the one in 83 was justified, the one in 86 was not. Then, of course, you remove the fairness doctrine in 87. That's when the whole falling apart of the media really started. And then under Clinton, it went into the stratosphere, like people still are in total denial about. Obviously, between NAFTA and normal trade relations with China, but then ultimately the 96 Telecom Act. I'm curious as to what the European consensus of people that you talk to think when they see our media, and especially the way it's been over the past several years, the sensationalism, the fact that it's rooted in such limited substance, and it's all about divide and conquer. There is very little, if anything, that is used as benefit. And let's be honest, there's a lot of content creators and independent media who basically make their living off of critiquing corporate media. So there's definitely a significant problem to that. And I'm curious as to how you guys see the way we deal with things here in this country.
I mean, I guess like I think it really depends how much you pay attention. Like you mentioned Reagan there. We had this thing where Margaret Thatcher and Rupert Murdoch made this very nice little deal where she would not push like an investigation, or she would not allow an investigation into Rupert Murdoch's takeover of the Times and the Sunday Times, which like pushed his share of the British media beyond what we consider to be acceptable under antitrust laws. And in exchange, he agreed to back her. So since then, Rupert Murdoch's had a ridiculous outsized influence on the British press, and our tabloid media that makes up like 80% of our print media is owned by like a handful of incredibly wealthy press barons that probably don't have the best interests of the people at heart. I get the feeling, but like our view of your media is really dependent on how much people are paying attention. Because I personally look at it, but I'm so like I watch a lot of what's going on in America because I see it as like warning signs for what we're gonna get a few years later. But British opinion on the American media, I think, is incredibly limited. Like I sometimes see people that I just expect to know better. There's two that come to mind. Andrew Adonis, who's Lord Adonis, who tried to run for the Labour Party as a candidate but didn't get elected, and Peter Stefanovic, who is like a trade unionist, like a leader of both of them I have seen make the comment, and you're gonna laugh so hard at this. They have made the comment, we need a fair, impartial media outlet in the UK like CNN. They have actually said that.
Well, one thing I'll say in Stanovich's defense is that, are you talking about CNN, like CNN in America? Or are you talking about CNN World?
No, CNN America.
No, CNN World is different. It is. You got to call a spade a spade. It's not great, but it's not the propaganda.
They were talking CNN in America.
Yeah, if they're talking CNN in America, I mean, that's scary.
Well, they're just stenographers. That's all they are.
And as you've seen,
it's not reported.
And as you've seen, across the ocean, the fact that, and again, I don't know how bad I'm assuming nepotism is probably
they have a monarchy.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm just saying, just in business in general. But the idea that Chris Cuomo would have a primetime media spot if his last name wasn't Cuomo, much like anything else, is a joke. And the idea he's still on TV,
and that's impartial CNN. Yeah. That's very independent CNN.
Like, as far as I'm concerned, because of what has come out about Andrew Cuomo, Chris Cuomo should be out of a job. Like, period. This shouldn't even be a thought. And the fact that they wasted so much time, and on top of the fact that he went out and got that freaking vaccine ahead of everybody, and everyone's like, well, he would have just done it for his family. I'm like, it just goes to show you that they're trying to turn everything into a serfs class. And I hope that there's enough pushback at some point where people start to recognize that. And I do think that there is enough people to combat that. But like I said, one of the biggest problems we have in this country is people don't want to check their egos. They like playing on teams. They like being separated. They like identities. I'm a liberal. I'm a conservative. I'm this and that.
This brings it back to the echo chamber that we were talking about at the very beginning. And that is what plagues us.
Yeah.
That's what plagues us. And I think that it plagues us here locally. It plagues our country. Like, it's every little part of microcosm where you would find people just want to be with people that agree with them in their little safe spaces. And we're getting so more and more broken and disconnected.
You're never going to get anywhere if you think that your goal is to basically talk amongst the same people, because the truth is 99.9% of the time, especially when it comes to the people in charge, like Rupert Murdoch, the only way you would ever get Rupert Murdoch to change his ways is if it affected his bottom line. That is the only way that he would change. And that's the only way anybody else would change. If you think that by telling other people, especially people that are in the working class, that we don't need you, you've already lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's already over. So don't even bother wasting your time. I don't know if there is sort of that consensus that's happening, but I think it's very important that people truly do understand that the UK and the United States share a lot of similarities, but the type of programs that you have, which at least allow people to live in dignity, even if they're suffering, is something that we don't have in the States. And the idea that we can keep going at the bare minimum without a universal healthcare system and without some type of a universal basic income to either make up for what's happened over the course of this pandemic, or to even have a living wage, it's not going to stand. Because at some point, people are just not going to have it anymore. And I'm curious as to your perspective. Is that sort of thing also happening in the UK? Because I do think things are going to come to a head. As like I said, this is one of the last topics we'll talk about. China is really starting to come into focus now, because I think people are really understanding the power that that country holds over the rest of the world. And they pay slave wages. They are a communist country. And a lot of the things that we buy here, and I'm sure that they buy in the UK, are made in Indochina. And that's a big problem. And I don't know if people realize how much worse this is going to get. And I noticed something over the last year. You know how vocal in social media somebody like LeBron James is, and his animosity that he had towards Trump. But whenever the issue of China came up, LeBron never said anything. And I think that says a lot about the mindset of where a lot of people are. Is that a lot of people at the top are willing to play this game as long as it's benefiting them, and it's on the side that it's benefiting them. Yeah. How is the China influence in the UK? And is that something that we need to be taking more seriously?
In the UK specifically, it's really hard to tell. It's not as overt as it is in America. It's not like you've got like the Chinese Communist Party standing up and saying that they've like bought off the son of Boris Johnson. or at least claiming to have bought him off, because that would be expensive. We don't know how many children he's got. And that's a real thing. Like, there's estimates that he has like 5 to 7 kids from numerous different women. And he actually, fun fact, left his previous wife, who was recovering or still had cancer at the time, for his new current wife.
Classy.
So, oh yeah,
real classy. I mean, that's the kind of guy you want running the country. But the China influence is most like prevalent for me in just the way that we've accepted the lockdowns, and the way that we're kind of fine with this like free market, like let's ship everything offshore, like get everything made somewhere else because it'll be cheaper sort of ideology. Like, those are the two things that China has given us the most influence in. I mean, I think, who was pointing this out to me? I think it was Jeffrey Tucker, but I could be wrong. I can't remember. But they were basically pointing out that Imperial College London and Neil Ferguson, the people that predicted this like monstrously high death toll within months from COVID, are like the one of the biggest like recipients of Chinese funds of any university in the UK. And it made me think, I was like, maybe they're just like enjoying saying what China likes to hear, because they're getting a lot of money from them. And if you like Google Imperial College China or Imperial College London China, you get like one of their pages, and it's like when Xi Jinping came to visit, and there's like loads of cool like photos of him interacting like just like a normal person with all the faculty and the students, and it's beautiful to see them embracing with open arms a murderous dictator who is paying. I think you were probably giving him a little bit too much credit in saying they pay wages. They don't exactly pay people in Xinjiang.
No, they're slaves. I call them, but for Apple, I call them slaves.
Yeah, I mean, like I my friend repeatedly points this out to me, and it's an argument that I buy into, is that you see, if we just stop buying their stuff for like 3 months, the country would probably collapse. Like if we just like put stupid sanctions on them for 3 months, do you like, I just ask myself something. It's like, could we live without China's stuff for 3 months, and that would put their economy under such a strain that the country would start to break?
Like, I think that's why
that was one of the
they own us though financially, not just that. Like, that's the thing. Like, if they really call in their debt to us, our kids are going to be working in Chinese labor camps as well.
Yeah, we
need to be teaching them Mandarin.
Well, it's a very precarious situation. And this is the one signature thing that Trump did that I absolutely 100% supported. When he was elected, he axed the TPP, and that was a thank you to the people who got him elected in the Rust Belt. And so but the war never ended, because we still had normal trade relations with China. We still had NAFTA. He did a couple of things for farmers, but overall it wasn't an improvement. And we're still, sort of circling the drain here. And then ultimately Trump found himself in a situation where he could rally the most people by basically going full-blown nationalistic, if not outright fascist. And so because of that, there wasn't enough of a consensus amongst the working class to say, yeah, this is the path we want to take. Trump was simply the wrong person to be in charge, because he didn't want to actually do any work. And that's a big problem. But we are going to be faced with a much greater issue now, because I still think the biggest fear I have of the Biden presidency is that they are going to try to bring back the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And if they put that through, if people think it's bad now, they ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, this is going to be as bad as it's ever been, because totally, our kid you should be learning Mandarin. That's funny. We are going to get to a point where we're not going to have any choices. And everyone thinks, oh, it's never going to happen. Of course it does. History has shown. How many people?
The last year has been like the biggest debunking of that phrase. Oh, that could never happen. That like the last year has, like, every single time I say, oh, but that'll never happen. Oh, they couldn't possibly do that. It just, I like 3 months later, I'm like, why did I say it couldn't happen? Like, China they've petitioned. I don't know if you've seen this, actually. This is kind of really under the radar. Like, a few days ago, I read that China have petitioned the World Health Organization to run the global immunity passport. And it's just like, yes, let's let the country that has the social credit system design our international like travel standards.
Oh yeah.
That seems like a great idea.
Well, that's what I say about like people like Jeff Bezos. Yeah, let's give him control of our water and our air too. You know, like let's just there's no limitations to how we are willing to give up control. I mean, that's
and we don't really have that many people with the ways and means that actually have any sensibility to the real problems that go on. I mean, you've got Richard Branson and others that, you know, on the surface seem like they're really doing a good job, but the truth is they're not doing what needs to be done structurally. Just like I think, you know, there really aren't that many good, if any, billionaires out there. I happen to be a fan of Mark Cuban, but even though I think he does get it, he just can't say it because either he chooses not to or he thinks that, you know, I think a lot of them fear because so much of their money is tied up in various investments around the world that if they start saying the wrong thing, that's going to get them into trouble. I don't know what the end game is or where we ultimately go from here, but I do think a new age economy is what's ultimately going to get us there. And I do think something like modern monetary theory is one of those ways. But I also think, as we bring this conversation full circle, I do think Brexit was a watershed moment. And I do think the uniting of working people is what is ultimately going to save us. If we're able to be saved at this point, I don't know. But I do think that there's enough people that are aware. It's now just a question of, can we bring them together? And I think by having conversations like this, it's how we're going to get closer to where we need to be. And with that said, if you have any final words, Josh, I know you're probably itching for the bed, but, you know, definitely share one more time about your book, where they can find it. And, you know, we really appreciate you coming on this evening.
Yeah, no problem. So my book is Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. Yeah, there's a great little graphic you've made up.
Yeah, see, that's why
let me tell you, she is a very talented artist, and I'm not kissing her butt. I'm telling you, she really knows what she's doing. She's good. I'm crafty. Very good.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. But yeah, so
I wanted to put up the book.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, you can get the book on Amazon. But if you don't want to give Jeff Bezos any more money and make sure, you know, if you don't want him to have that like 27th mansion, you can go to bookshop.org. They're like this company that they're trying to be the Amazon for indie bookstores.
And just because you decide bookshop.org?
Bookshop.org. And if you're in the UK,
and that's where everybody should be going.
Yeah, so you can get my book there, and you can check out my website, thegist.co.uk, that I have links to all my podcast and everything that I do. If people want to check it out, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook anymore because I ditched that because you know, like, screw Mark Zuckerberg.
Thank you.
Of all of it, let me tell you something. And one thing I will say, and like I said, there's not a lot of good billionaires out there. I think Jack Dorsey at least has a conscience. Mark Zuckerberg does not have a soul, much less a conscience.
I think he's like Data from Star
Trek: The Next Generation. Oh yeah,
he's like
he's a robot.
Android.
He doesn't function. He doesn't have emotion. Like, it doesn't exist in his makeup. And and never forget that Zuckerberg basically stole the idea from the Winklevoss brothers. So it's,
oh my God,
you know,
all right, we don't need to talk about the Winklevoss.
No.
Yeah, they're super crypto crazy these days.
So what else, and tell people what else you work on, because you also have other things going on besides the book.
Yeah, I mean, so I do my podcast, which is really fun. I like to talk to people from every possible like opinion that I can find. It's I have literally talked from everyone from complete Marxists to people who were at the Capitol on January 6th.
To me,
and everything in between. And to you as well. I don't. Yeah, exactly. Go check out my episode with Jen. That was a lot of fun.
And wait, remind me, it's the Gist, right?
The Gist, Jist.
Okay, Gist.
Yeah, there was a play on words in my name, Josh.
Yeah, the Gist, and it's available on all the same places that we are.
The Gist is the what is that?
The Gist.
That's the website.
That's
the Gist.
Show.
Oh,
yeah.
So
the Gist is the website, jist.co.uk.
Okay.
And everything is there. And I'm also on YouTube and Twitter.
The Jist.
Yeah. So yeah, guys, check it out. That's how we met. And I remember when we talked that time when I came on your show, like I could have just kept talking. I said to him, like, but I know, like, and I could talk to you, like, you're very easy to talk to.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
And I do think that, you know, the more we spread the word, the more we build this coalition. Because like I said, we're not running a YouTube channel for money.
No.
If we make money, that's great. And we'll use it to build GenCore. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's
so. And for those of you who do want to become a Patreon, just so you know, it's not going into our pockets so we can live off this.
All right,
I have a living. She's a lawyer. You know.
Yeah,
we're doing this because we actually believe in the cause and we want to help.
And that's you too, right?
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do. And so, guys, definitely go to the Jist. That is where you can follow Josh. Definitely go to, I don't want to say it wrong. I don't want to make a mistake.
Bookshop.org.
Go to bookshop.org
and buy
Brexit, The Establishment Civil War. I'm sure it's a fantastic read. We really appreciate you coming on, and we hope to see you again soon.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me, guys.
Josh.
Cheers, my friend.
Bye.
No Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.